All right, we're going to get started on our workshop Tuesday, July 15th, 2025, a little after 5 p.m. Call to order. Declaration of a quorum, 5 members present, 1 on the way, 1 absent. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here. We do have a speaker for our workshop. During this time, we'll hear from citizens who registered to speak prior to the meeting in accordance with the board operating procedures. The Open Meetings Act prevents us from responding to speakers regarding items not on the agenda. Comments related to items on the agenda may be discussed during deliberations on that specific agenda item. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Those needing an interpreter may have up to 6 minutes. Each person has 1 opportunity at the microphone regardless of minutes used. Unused minutes may not be accrued by another speaker. The executive assistant will time the comments and alert the president when time has expired. The board asks that those addressing the board refrain from derogatory comments. And our speaker is Heather Green, and we're going to use this microphone up here. Is she here? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Heather Green. Thank you for the opportunity to share my concerns about the proposed intermediate and middle school rezoning of Castlegate 1. The proposed plans will exacerbate traffic along an already congested area. For those of you less familiar with my extended neighborhood, Victoria Avenue is bounded at the north by Rock Prairie, near Rock Prairie Elementary. Proceeding southbound, it passes by CSHS, continuing through Castlegate 1 and 2, as well as Creek Meadows, until it intersects with Wellborn Road. The Victoria corridor cannot support the traffic that the 2 proposed plans will induce. It is already a nightmare during the school year. Morning commuter and high school traffic presently paralyzes Victoria south of the Fitch Light. Additionally, traffic around Rock Prairie Elementary also creates congestion along Victoria. When Victoria was developed, it was not developed to properly accommodate the growth that was actually experienced and brought about by Castlegates 1 and 2, as well as Creek Meadows. Unfortunately, it is the main corridor used by Castlegate residents to proceed north, as we don't have easy or quick access to either Wellborn or Highway 6. The addition of the entire intermediate and middle school student populations of Castlegate will create an untenable traffic situation affecting all neighborhoods along the Victoria corridor. It will unduly burden all area residents, not only those with school-age children, but also all residents, as many commuters use this stretch of road as well. Allowing Castlegate students to remain at their current schools prevents this problem. Moreover, as a runner, I fear that the additional traffic will present a safety concern to our walking and biking students. I mentioned this knowing how many times I alone have narrowly been hit due to people failing to stop at stop signs, failing to just look both ways, and a general failure to pay attention due to the morning rush. An increase in traffic will escalate these safety concerns. Now, I don't want to ignore that you have some very real issues that the board is going to have to address in the near term. However, I would urge each of you to consider other neighborhoods that possess alternate driving routes. Both Nantucket and Indian Lakes are located farther from Wellborn and PT than Castlegate, yet are equidistant in time and proximity to both sets of intermediate and middle schools because they have direct access to Highway 6. Greens Prairie Reserve also falls into this category, as its entrance and exit sits directly across from Nantucket. Mission Ranch also has easy access to Rock Prairie and Wellborn. Considering these neighborhoods with access to major roads addresses the student population concerns, yet does not further paralyze Victoria or create an undue burden affecting all neighborhoods along the Victoria corridor. Thank you for your time and consideration.
That'll bring us to item D1, receive a report on the district cybersecurity. Mr. Hutchinson.
President Horak, Dr. Harkrider, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to give you the state of cybersecurity so that we can better understand what we're doing as a district to protect our children and staff, and what Texas A&M University can also do to help us at the end, which, as you know, it's an agenda item on the regular board meeting tonight for you to approve. Before we begin, I wanted to go over a little bit about, let me pull this forward, a little foundation of what all we have in place already. The internet is a wonderful tool. We encourage it, we use it, we have to use it for our students, but it also brings some perils that we have to deal with. Our first item in there is the wonderful firewall. I don't have a mouse to show you in the middle, but it's in the middle of it. So think of that as a doorway. So as our campus is, we walk through the front door. We let some people in, we keep some people out. That firewall does the exact same process on a network. So everything's set to block everybody coming in unless we allow them in. So that is one item that we've got in place. A content filter, which required by E-rate, we have to have in place, which is also a wonderful tool for us. It is the one thing that basically blocks adult content. So alcohol, tobacco, firearms, pornography, it blocks all of that. If you have a child in this district and they've complained about TikTok not being accessible on the network, that is what's doing it. So it's just a means to protect our kids. The other thing we like to do is we like to separate our network, segment our network. So we have in place tools that only business needs to use, databases and things like that. A student does not need access to those kind of tools. So we segment that off. So it's not shared in between each other. They can't see it. They can't get to it. Kind of protects the stuff, which leads me to our public versus private. So we have students that use their own devices on campus. They essentially are on our network, but they're outside our network. So they go through the firewall, through the filter, and come back in. So they can't get access to those internal resources that they're not allowed to. The other thing we do is credit card machines. Everybody's worked a concession stand, and they have the little credit card reader. That is on the public side, so they can't get access into our internal stuff. But it still goes through our filter and our firewall to keep everything safe and protected. Endpoint detection and response. Antivirus on steroids is what this essentially is. So when it identifies malware or something happening on the network, it will take it, it will contain it, and so it doesn't spread throughout our district. This is one of the things that we've been doing internally with ourselves that we're looking for Texas A&M University to assist us on managing it and doing a really good job at it. So that will come further on. Operating system updates and patches. Everybody hates when Windows says we got to upgrade your machine. You got to restart. Well, unfortunately, a vulnerability has been identified, and that has to be taken care of. A restart usually fixes that because it downloads it and does it. So we provide all of our devices are updated, patched to make sure we're safe. User education, we've put a huge emphasis on, is because most of the threats that we have coming in are user-based. They're our highest risk. I mean, it's just people don't know. And so we're putting a lot of resources into making sure that education is big so that we know what to click. This also helps in your personal life. So all of our faculty, staff, teachers, students know if you can't do it here, you probably shouldn't be doing it at home either. So that hopefully gives a little bit of foundation of the components that we have. You're going to hear me talk about CISA a lot, Cybersecurity Information Security Agency. That is a federal program that we use. What they did in 2023 is they went out and they studied all of K through 12, they did surveys. And the good news is they realized that all the issues that we face here in College Station, federally, they face the same way. So they came back with 3 findings, and one is obvious, finite resources. If I had a bucket of money that I could just spend and do whatever I want to, then we could protect it, but we don't live in that kind of world. So they've recommended that we go through and we prioritize. What's our highest threat? What do we need to protect? In my world, just for example, it's our financial system. So, we have student information system too, but financial system is a good example. If that goes down, Ms. Wilson over here is writing checks by hand because that affects payroll. That affects paying bills. It also has all our information on employees. It has their social security numbers. So we do a lot of protecting of that. So based on the money that we have, we've prioritized that. So we've identified the high-end elements. We decided how are we going to detect and protect these elements, and God forbid something happens, how do we restore and recover from an incident? The next thing is insufficient IT resources and cybersecurity capacity. It's, again, everybody knows, we don't have enough to do, so. So how do we technize that? We have to recognize and actively address, these constraints that were placed on us. So we have to use what we have the best way possible. We rely upon partners. That's the next one is we rely upon partners. But we have to maximize every dollar we have and use it in the best way possible. So is it better for us to manage our network for our cybersecurity threats and try to hire people in-house? Probably not, when we can do a share with Texas A&M and we can utilize their expertise and they can spread the cost across a bigger platform, a bigger base. So, and the last one is collaboration of information sharing. So we are not an island. We can't do this on our own. So we rely upon CISA, again, because they give us a daily briefing of what we need to look for, what we need to be aware of. We also rely on our regional service centers. You know, what are they looking at? There's groups that we also are members of to give us information. So a lot of that, hopefully, if we can all identify threats before it happens and gets too far, we can take it out. I used Verizon's data breach report just as an example, but our biggest problem is we need to know what our weaknesses are. So on the report, it says 20% of data breaches occur because of vulnerabilities, exploitations. That's your patches, your updates we need to do. What we've also done is we've hired recently, we had a regional service center come in and do an audit. And they looked at our site, they looked at inside, outside, try to find all our vulnerabilities and identify them. We've then said we need to take it a little bit further, and so we've got another group coming in, and they're really looking at our system and making sure that we have all the vulnerabilities patched that we need to patch. So we are relying heavily on outside sources to take care of the resources that we can't do inside. The other thing is a human element. So 60% of breaches occur because of humans. That's where our training comes in. We've had training in the past, it's worked, but it's getting a little stale. So we've just reached out to another provider, and it's going to hopefully be a lot more interesting. It's got better videos. It's got a gamification module included in it. So when they do phishing attempts, it'll mark, you know, did you fall for it? Did you not fall for it? We can break it into groups. So I don't know if you've seen our campuses. They're very competitive. And so we can put a dashboard out. And if we find out that AMCHS is doing better than Pebble Creek, trust me, they'll know, they'll rub it in, and Pebble Creek will pick up their game to do it. Same with the board members. If we want to spread y'all out and see which one's better at it, we can definitely create that as a dashboard and see who's more competitive. You don't know what to do? Okay, yeah. So we'll do it. And the last item I want to put in there before I hand it over to A&M is artificial intelligence. So that's the big word. It's a tool. Everybody's using it. You know, everybody's talking about it. But we need to put guardrails in place to make sure that when our people are using it, they're not putting confidential information out there. We're making sure our data is safe. And so that is a next up and coming thing. So we're also looking at things like that. But I just want to throw that in there as just so you need to know, we are aware of that. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Braxton.
Yeah.
I almost said Brandy, sorry. Braxton, to talk about what Texas A&M University can do for us and what the benefits are to the district. So.
Thank you very much for providing us the time to come and speak with you. My name is Michael Esparza, and I'm here with Braxton Williams. We're part of the leadership team for Texas A&M Cybersecurity, and particularly cybersecurity operations. So we handle the detection, analysis, and incident response kind of work for all 11 universities, soon to be 12 universities and 8 state agencies underneath the A&M system umbrella. We also have some local government customers and some private partners that we work with. So everybody that we have here, Braxton and I have worked from the ground level to the very top to the CEO through these. So I'll talk about what we do. We talk about something called managed detection and response. So this provides a next generation team of cyber operators. So we have our team that would be able to come in and help you out here. We are proactive when it comes to the detection and containment of threats. You benefit from Texas A&M systems, like not just the workforce, but the experience that we gather across the entirety of the A&M system. If something happens in Texarkana or down Laredo or out in El Paso, Hudspeth County, all that data gets funneled in through our team. We're able to work on it, and then we're able to hunt on the rest of the data. So we're able to help your users, your students, and your staff here. All this is to say we provide continuous monitoring, detection, and response to cyber threats. We understand that there are, budget constraints is a big one. It's very difficult to recruit, retain, and train staff. And then on top of that, the necessary tooling that comes in place to be able to do what we do. So we understand that's a big point of it. One of the big issue that comes across for school districts is particularly ransomware. Viruses and ransom have evolved from what they were a couple of years ago. Now it's not things that just get caught on disk. It's things that are happening that the user brings in that eventually will fester, and then as soon as an operator gets access and an operator understands where he's at, can actually execute the ransomware to lock down the servers. I worked one a while back that I can talk about where a teacher was really worried that 40 years of her aides and her data were going to be locked up. So when she heard that we were coming to help, she brought us a bag of some drinks and some food, and we were able to make sure that her data wasn't actually ransomware, or wasn't ransomed. So that's a great thing on our end. And then the big thing that nobody really talks about is alert fatigue on people that aren't responsible solely for security. You have, they have their job doing X, Y, or Z, and then all of a sudden here comes these things that just keep flowing through via email. Here's this alert. Here's this alert. I don't know what it means, so it's probably not too important, or it just keeps piling up. Our team of analysts actually work through every single thing that we see and report on the known bad. So part of the strategic partnership that we offer is simplified pricing, predictable cost, close collaboration. We give David and his team access to all of our team of analysts, myself and Braxton, our executive director, at a moment's notice. While we're doing that, we're offloading the monitoring and response burden to our team, and our team is able to retain, train these specialized experts in what they do when it comes to not only analysis, but actually responding to an incident, or if something gets too out of hand, an incident management team who will work with your PIO, who work with your people, your media liaisons, to make sure that we have everything, laid out the right way. So what we protect against, and the big things, ransomware, and then where we sit in academia is a lot more of the state-sponsored actors, but it's better for you all, because while we're combating those, we're actually we benefit from the intelligence that comes from us working these incidents, where we can dial it back and say, okay, although these nations aren't going to attack CSISD directly, we can distill and say, okay, these are the things we need to be looking for. We need to dial in here so that in case something does happen, we can actually find it. So we're able to monitor and detect malicious activity or originating from either within or without your network. And then when it comes to the services that it includes, what we do, endpoint agents on every device, full analysis, response, and containment of threats that happen, continuous alert monitoring, organization-specific threat intelligence. So David was talking to me earlier about a meeting that he was on, where one of our other employees provides specific organizational threat intelligence to the state of Texas, to K-12s, to higher ed. We provide an instant response team if things get out of hand. We deploy on-site. We like to say when we talk to everybody that we can deploy within 48 hours, but I'm sure that Braxton and I can get here a lot faster than that, considering we're all here in Bryan College Station. We offer protective DNS, so it's another layer of kind of similar to the content filtering that David and his team kind of run. Our team, primarily Braxton and his team, handle the product licensing and maintenance, so you don't have to develop the expertise to run all the tools that you need for the analysts to actually do the work. We handle that. And then we've come with simplified pricing that we've already provided David. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and let us know if you have any questions, comments, concerns.
So we've had some email issues and concerns. Does this kind of tie in to being able to resolve those, as far as folks not getting emails, not receiving, things like that, stuff going straight to spam or something like that? Just trying to figure that all out.
It's not directly related to Texas A&M. It's part of our other project. The training that we're also receiving, that I mentioned that we're training to a different training program, it does have the ability, and we'll turn back spam, because we locked it down to keep spam away. This will give me a little bit more security, but we're going to open up spam back into it. And this I won't say the name, but anyway, this provider also has the ability to start ferreting out which ones are really spam, which ones are not, so that we can alleviate that concern that we've had from a lot of our,
Well, I know
parents.
as board members, we don't get all the emails from the community, and we want to make sure we're getting those,
Yes.
so that, we don't hear through the grapevine or something like that. So I know that was a big deal. And then obviously for parents trying to contact, I know we have Schoology and all that. So, but, just trying to, in regards to that. Other question I had was, when we're talking about firewalls and we use a whole lot of different stuff, when we're talking about like the athletics and the extracurricular, where they're selling tickets and things like that through a third party, that's not our responsibility. Or do we have any liability exposure for, let's say, right across the street here, Consol football, selling tickets to get into the game through the third party? Do we have any liability on that, or is that off of us? How's that work?
Well, and that's the second item of CISA is, but IT doesn't have the money to do things like that.
Right.
And we look to our vendors to do that.
Okay.
So the concession stand sales, the ticket sales, that's all done through a cloud provider.
Okay.
And so we are providing a tunnel, a pipe, basically, if you get from the device into that. And so the only liability we have is if something happens when they're actually scanning the card, but once it's done, it's in the system and it's done. So we're not liable. Once it leaves a person's hand, we're no longer liable for it.
Okay.
Yeah, PCI compliance is a big deal, and that's what I'm concerned about too. Yes, sir.
Anything else?
Yeah, I was going to ask just about the general programming. We've heard about what it covers. Like, what is it replacing that, or is it replacing something that we've paid for, internally, right? Because obviously we're looking at the price of it for at the board meeting. So, are we spending less money somewhere else?
No,
I guess?
no, excellent question. So, the endpoint detection response that I mentioned earlier, we pay for that already. And the price difference between what we've been paying out of pocket for that software alone that we're monitoring, we're managing, we're doing all of the work ourselves, is a little bit less than what we get from Texas A&M. So Texas A&M is a little bit more, but they're 24/7, they're 365 days a year. So in the case of July 3rd, everybody, we're gone, we're done. So if something were to happen July 4th, we might not know about it until July 6th or 7th when we came back that Monday. So with A&M, we're paying just a little bit more, and it's like $5,000 more to do this for them to manage and monitor everything. And so then they can alert me if there's an issue that pops up on the 5th that I'm not aware of.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, and I'm going to ask one other just specific thing from your very first discussion when you were talking about content filtering, because I know, just to clarify, make sure I hear it right and understand how it works, right? We can do some content filtering on students' devices if they are on the Wi-Fi, but if they are on their own, if they're on the cell network?
You're correct. If they're going through our network, we filter. Everything's filtered through our network. But if they turn their Wi-Fi off and use their cell phone data plan, we have no control.
Just clarifying. That's what I figured.
Yes.
Thank you.
All good? We appreciate the partnership with A&M. That's always fun in the backyard. So appreciate y'all helping us out.
No, yeah. Thank you for having us. We're happy to answer any other questions.
All right, that'll bring us to item 2, consideration and discussion regarding naming the TASBY delegate, assembly representative, and alternate. Y'all probably seen some emails, September 11th through the 14th. I think I'm going off memory, so my apologies. It's in Houston this year, not Dallas or San Antonio. And I believe Carrie sent out an email because she's got to start getting all that together for us. But we have to have a TASBY rep and a TASBY delegate. Kim has served in that. I've served in that. Iggy served in that. Can't remember Josh. Can't remember Darren. But it's a great opportunity to, and I'll let obviously you guys talk on it as well. But great opportunity, obviously, to learn more about what TASBY is doing for public schools, especially, this might be pretty interesting, especially right after the legislative bills. So we could get some fine tuning on what that looks like and how different districts are handling it. Even though by then a lot of will have to have adopted the policies and procedures they're going to move forward with by September 1st. So not sure who has interest in serving in any of these roles, but it's just a discussion. We don't have to make a decision today. Anybody want to share anything else? Not all at once.
Well, I'll just say, obviously, I've done it a number of times as the delegate, and it's not necessarily an exciting afternoon. It's Saturday lunch,
That's
and
not
then
how you need to sell this, Kim.
what? Say again? Sorry, but I'm just gonna put the but in there, right? I think it is, like you're kind of saying, it is I don't think we're necessarily learning so much about what other districts are doing. This is really just the way, it's kind of like being at the legislature where, there are hundreds of delegates from all across the school districts in the state, and voting and discussing on what we think is important for public education from school board members. So that's really, what the task is. I kind of think since the legislature just happened, I don't know if there will be as many changes, right? I think to me, the exciting cycle is when we start with grassroots and then we develop what is important for schools and school boards, and then like maybe next year when you really decide as the whole school body on. So that's kind of the process. The delegate and the alternate can do the lunch session together. Kim and I did last year, and then you sit through the rest of the voting and stuff. So it is an interesting thing to do, and I think it is a way to meet other people from other districts who are very much engaged in the process. So that's kind of my spiel on it. I'd be willing to step back and not do it, and maybe just be the alternate so.
I was going to say that I'm happy to support anyone who wants to do it. I did go as the alternate last year, so I was not fully involved, just got a little glimpse. But if we're just looking for someone who's willing, I do have willingness to be considered to do that this year. So.
Okay. Well, like I said, we don't have to make a call till next board meeting, really, because we got to send that in to TASBY before we head out. So just be thinking about it. We can have more discussion, finalize all that next meeting and go from there. So brings us to item 3, consideration and discussion of board policy DMB local. Ms. Hester, come on up.
DNB is just formalizing our principal appraisal and assistant appraisal system and aligning it with the recommended state and getting it in accordance with the administrative regulations. And then clarifying the appraisal system used for campus administrators other than principals and assistant principals. And that will be determined by what position they're in and what responsibilities they have, and consist of local appraisal system and a version of the TPES, which is the state principal evaluation and support system. That's what they call TPES. So we're just formalizing putting the appraisal systems in place and aligning with the state.
Any questions? Everybody understand kind of where we're at on that? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Hester.
My pleasure.
Brings us to item 4, consideration and discussion of House Bill 1481 relating to the use of personal wireless communication devices by students during instructional time. The man, the myth, the legend who knows all about this, Mr. Dunson.
Now we're back talking about cell phones. Last time we were talking about it, we were looking at some survey results, and this time we're talking about new state law. So during the 89th legislative session, House Bill 1481 did pass. The governor signed it on June 20th, which was just shortly after our last regular board meeting. So this is our first opportunity to bring it to you to have this discussion. The reason why we're doing so is because the bill requires the school board in public school districts in Texas, this is statewide, this is not just a CSISD thing, to approve a written policy prohibiting a student from using a personal communication device while on school property during the school day. So we're going to look at the rest of the bill, kind of highlight some of the high points, but the details are important here because we want to make sure that what we're communicating to you guys as the board, as well as those who are watching online here at the board meeting and our community at large, understand what the specifics are and what the district has to do to comply with this new law. So the next part of the bill requires the board in that policy to either prohibit students from bringing devices to school or designate a method for storage. That is the language of the bill, and we'll talk specifically about what that could potentially look like here in CSISD. The policy also must establish disciplinary measures, and again, we'll talk specifics about that and what that's going to look like here in CSISD in just a second. make accommodations for IEPs, 504s, medical needs, and any safety provisions that are outlined by the state, district, or the campus. And then in the bill, it does say that the TEA will provide model policy language. At this point, we are anticipating that to come at some point in August, but as you know, we start school August 13th, and we need to provide expectations and clear communication to families before that first date. So that's why we're having this conversation now, so we can start that process. So the bill also defines what a personal communication device is. This has been a big question, lots of conversation around this. The bill, this is language directly from 1481. It's a telephone, cell phone, smartphone, flip phone, tablet, smartwatch, radio device, paging device, any kind of electronic device capable of telecommunication or digital communication. I'm not sure I've never ever used a pager. I don't think those were in existence by the time I was born. Just had to throw that one.
Is he old enough to be giving this presentation?
Austin, do you know what a telephone is?
I may be the most qualified because I grew up with a cell phone. It does get specific to that the devices that the district has, tablets, laptops, those kinds of things, those are not included in the prohibited devices. Those can be used by students during instructional time during the day. So we want to talk about some draft language. This is really just kind of looking at other school districts. There have been school districts around the state who have had their board meetings the first week of July, last week of June, and so it gives us kind of an opportunity to see what other districts are doing, as well as have internal conversations with administration at the district level and campuses to talk about what this looks like. So the direction that these conversations have been and kind of where we're trying to prioritize this communication is to let folks know that the decision to either prohibit kids from bringing any devices to school or provide a storage method is that we would lean more towards allowing them to bring it and providing that very clear expectation of what that storage method is. And so in this draft language, we have put up there that students can bring a device to school, cell phone, smartwatch, whatever that may be, but it has to be off and put away during the school day. So that means first bell to last bell. It would have to be off and put in their backpack, purse, locker, or any other designated storage area, and would need to be off. And so that's kind of the big crux of the bill is, can they bring it? Yes or no? How are we going to store it? So any questions about that piece of it?
I guess just the small little question that if somebody asks me, does a pocket count as a storage location, and who?
It does
I mean,
not.
has there been any precedent for that?
Yeah, it has to be stowed off the student is what the draft language says. And we can work on this policy language and make sure that that is abundantly clear and break down the policy for parents to let them know, and students, that off of the student means that it has to be stored away from their person.
But we are not going to be searching kids' pockets for cell phones. So that will not happen. It is what it is. It's law. We've got to make the best of it. But I'm also not going to put our staff in a position that we're, instead of teaching math, science, social studies, we're chasing cell phones all day. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to get a policy put in place, discipline measures, support our administrators who will support our teachers. We've got teachers without a policy right now that never have an issue with cell phones because kids are engaged and they're too busy to worry about a cell phone. So it's a process, but it's also something that we're not going to get off in the weeds and start chasing butterflies to try to figure out or catch a kid doing something wrong.
So related to discipline, consequences, this is something that we're going to work with campus administrators with. In fact, this week we'll have some conversations with them and provide appropriate consequences per grade level in campus. And we want to have that collaborative process with those principals to define what that looks like and then put that into policy as well, make sure those expectations are clear. The exemption piece of it, students can be exempted from the policy if it's determined necessary by a physician or a medical provider, or if their ARD committee or 504 committee determines that an exception would be necessary to provide their accommodations. So implications for this, I think the big question is for parents and students who are used to communicating with each other during the school day, how is that going to work? How can I tell my kid that someone else is going to pick them up that day, or they need to get an urgent message to them, and we're really going to encourage our parents and guardians to call the school and relay those messages kind of the old-fashioned way. Call the school, email the staff, let them know of the message that they need to get to their student. Staff communication is also something that's been brought up. We have, especially at the high school level, our extracurricular activities, our athletics teams, choirs and bands. They use communication through things like Sports U. And if a coach needs to tell a baseball team, hey, we're going to meet in this room today rather than on the field because it's raining, and that communication usually happens during the school day with a cell phone, we need to address how that's going to work at the campus level and work with our principals on that. There's also going to be questions about, what about an emergency situation? Again, further commentary and collaboration that we need to have in defining kind of what that looks like and how to answer those questions with our schools. And then another thing that's been brought up has been our anonymous reporting. If you've been in our secondary campuses, you've probably seen posters around that have a QR code that allows students to submit an anonymous tip. A lot of them are using their phones to do that during the school day. That would then have to transition into another method. And the district, working with our safety director, Ms. Boudreau, as well as our technology department, making sure that that platform is accessible on district devices. But also to make a point that that platform is open 24/7 and students would be able to submit those anonymous tips before or after the school day. Remember, this is bell to bell. So students show up before the school day, they can use their phones respectfully. It's just got to be put away and turned off when that first bell rings, and then they can take it back out after that last bell rings. So next steps, like I said, we're going to collaborate with our principals on the discipline measures and start developing some communication resources for our families and staff, so our community can expect to see some of that stuff coming out about the direction that CSISD is going to go with this new law. And then in August, we're expecting to get some model policy from TEA. If we get that in time to go ahead and approve that at a special meeting early August, then we'll implement that. But ultimately, we will adopt a policy early August and update the student code of conduct appropriately. Any questions, comments, discussion related to the new law?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest questions that I've been getting from some parents that I just think is good for us to clarify is, well, what if a teacher says, hey, you can use your device? What if a cross country coach has been telling you to use a smartwatch to track your running? These kind of things, and I just think it'd be good for us to clarify whether that is or isn't allowed.
As far as use during the day as a reward or whatever, no. I mean, the law is very clear. It's black and white. There will be a phase-in period that kids have to get acclimated to this. Our staff have to get acclimated to it. Our campus principals will coach and work with them. But then it becomes kind of, okay, we're going to phase this in. And we talked with principals today. I think the first 3 days, we're kind of breaking in this policy Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then when we come back Monday, I mean, it has to be a go. Our kids are resilient. They rise to our expectations, but we've also got to be consistent. And, as far as an educator goes, you're breaking a state law. It's very clear. And they don't want to put themselves in that position because that's exposure that could threaten, obviously their livelihood and their job. And a lot of districts that have put this in place here over the last couple of years were very direct, and our policy's been successful because we were black and white. There was no gray area. And the ones that were trying to, well, you can use it in the hall, you can use it at lunch, it wasn't as successful. And so a policy is a policy, but it's only as good as how our team implements it. And so, I think we're going to have some discussions tomorrow with principals on discipline measures. And then, I've got confidence that they're going to go out and lead it. Right now, in intermediate, elementary and middle school, we really don't have a lot of issues. At our high school level, it's been a little bit more open. Kids use it at lunch, hallways, and things like that. It's going to be a shock for them. Took me a couple of days. I had to explain to my daughter that this was not my rule, that it was a state law. I even Googled it and showed her. So when your friends get mad, it was not me. But they'll figure it out. I think if we'll implement it correctly, I think we'll see a drop in fights and disruptions during the school day. And I think it's very achievable that kids are going to do better in the classroom because they're going to be a little bit more focused.
In the 17 years of my daughter's existence, this is the first school legislation she has paid attention to. I look forward to her retaining Mr. Ben to find a doctor to say why her phone needs to be medically attached to her hand. So I look forward to getting it surgically removed. But when you talk teacher retention, one of the key impacts is classroom behavior, right? And all our kids are saints. Well, they're not. Mine aren't perfect. And I would say that this is a major factor. There's some headaches, there's some concerns, right? But to your point, Missy, is not everybody's expected to have a phone, right? So that's an expectation on teachers, which we can manage. I like that we're ahead of this. But what I would ask is that parents need to be talking to their kids now, ahead of time, so it is not a shock. Yes, we have some concerns. Yes, parents want their kids to be reachable during the day if there's an emergency. But we all made it, like we survived. And there's still ways for us to communicate. But I think in terms of setting our teachers up for success, of not having to chase, disruptive behavior, I think we're ahead of the curve, and that's a good thing. But please, parents, talk to your kids about what's coming and expectations, because that's where it starts.
Austin does have plans to go ahead, since we're having that discussion today, to start putting this language out as far as how the law is currently written out to parents, staff, so they're aware of where this is coming. So prior to potentially August 7th, you guys taking action on official policy. It's not a surprise. It's basically just putting into print. And then we can list the discipline measures once those are approved as well.
And I was going to ask, and y'all have done a good job of this on a couple other things over the last couple of years. Even starting to create an FAQ that can be put on the website or provided to parents would be a good idea.
Put it out on TikTok.
Yes. Oh, that reminds me. Second question: where do bag phones fall?
Sir?
Bag phones?
It was not, bag phone was not on there.
I honestly don't know what he's talking about.
It was a phone in a bag.
You ever used a rotary dial, Austin?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I would have lost that bet. I was about to ask you that.
Oh. All right.
I just really support what Dr. Payne said and Dr. Harkrider about the enforcement and the consistency of it, and how I think that will help it be easier for our teachers, right? I think that was what, especially when we went back and looked at some of the comments from teachers in the survey. I mean, we had looked at the overall data, but then when we look at some of the specific comments, I think a lot of those were about consistency and enforcement. And so they're not having to worry about, another teacher does it a different way, So I think that'll make this work better. And I think I've heard the same thing from other districts as well. And I think some of the parents might be surprised. I don't know if we're going to get into what some of the different possibilities for the consequences are, right? Because I know we've seen there's some other examples from other districts, but
Yeah, we can give you a few. Dallas ISD recently adopted a policy, Conroe, that we've been kind of paying attention to some of the larger districts that have moved a little quicker. Taking the phone up the first time, it's given back at the end of the day. Taking the phone up the second time, you charge X amount. The third time, it's X amount. The fourth time, it's X amount. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but then that's more you got to pay attention to of how many times this has happened with a kid. So we'll figure that out. One of the biggest issues I'm concerned with is kids refusing to give you the phone, because it's going to happen. They're going to say, hey, put your phone up. I need your phone. They're going to say, I'm not giving you my phone. They're not going to give the phone for a million different reasons. One, they don't have money to come back and get it. Two, they've got a job. Whatever. I was an AP a long time ago when we started fighting this battle and had the same thing. Their kids' livelihoods, for some of them, it depends on their phone, and they're not going to give it up. And so then we're put in a position, according to state law, we have to have discipline measures for kids. So we're going to punish kids for not giving us the phone, and then obviously it's going to be some sort of suspension. So now we're taking them out of the classroom. So my hope is that we can be consistent with a policy. We build relationships with kids. and that trust factor that we're not trying to do anything to you, but this is a law and you've got to follow through with that. And we have confidence our staff's going to be able to handle that, but it will be a problem because kids will refuse to give the phones.
And just so we're clear, there was no funding associated with this, right? So when
There's
they say there
not.
has to be storage, it's
And
another
Mr.
unfunded mandate by the state to
Yes,
say,
sir.
you have to do this, but we're not going to pay you for it.
We are not spending any money on where to put devices. That's why we're using backpacks. I'm not going to ask a teacher to make sure when kids come in, they've got a pouch to put 30 phones up and count them, because I've got some friends, kids who work in other districts, they have fake phones that they put in the pouch and their phones in their pocket. Kids figure it out real quick. They've got a backpack, a purse, put it wherever you want to, just turn it off.
But I would encourage, all of us as the adults, the families and the teachers and the administrators to remember that we're going to be setting the tone for this. If we as parents are encouraging our kids, hey, you're going to be okay. This is going to be all right. You need to do what you're being asked to do. And hey, at 4:00, you can turn your phone back on. And if you had an important message during the day, you're going to see it and you can respond to it. It's okay sometimes to have to wait. I know when, one of my kids first got a cell phone, they would text me and it would be like, Mom, and it would like constant until I respond. I had to be like, I can't respond immediately all the time. And so I think that's just where we are. But I think that we as the adults can set the tone for that, our teachers and our families both, to make something that I think is going to be better for our kids in the long run.
You can block them too, Kim.
And it will be some extra work for our office staff and so forth, but obviously if there's true emergencies, they can contact our schools, our campuses at any point, and vice versa. The student can contact the parent.
Yeah.
And I would just, the one other thing, when you were asking about is there ever going to be options to pull this out for instructional time? I think it clearly uses that word. This is for nothing during the day, right? That is the law, so.
Yeah, we do the bond programs that we've had over the past few years have given us additional devices so that classrooms do have access to those. But the law is pretty clear that
Right.
Instructional time, phones are off and away.
Anything else? All right. We appreciate Mr. Dudson. Good luck. Brings us to item D5, receive a report on the 26-27 boundary adjustments and community input. Ms. Wilson.
Good afternoon, Dr. Harkrider. Mr. Horek, Board of Trustees, thank you so much for allowing us to present the boundary update. I always tell y'all county can be fun, but I'm not going to lie to you. Boundaries aren't that much fun. There is a reason why we have to look at boundaries, of course, and it's because we have to balance out our district to become a little bit more efficiency. So what's going on here at College Station ISD is we've got 3 elementary campuses that are at or above capacity, so we need to look at that. There are a couple of elementary campuses that are below, so they have 500 students or less, and so we're kind of looking at that too to kind of balance them out, because they all have one nurse, one assistant principal, one principal, and we need to balance that out. It gives additional opportunities to our students as well. So those are kind of why we make these hard decisions and look at things. Intermediate campuses and middle school campuses, the reason why we're looking at that is for the same reason. Wellborn is a little high and our pecan trail is a little low. Did I get that right? Cypress Grove, that's what I thought. So anyway, so that's why we're here tonight, just to kind of take a deeper look. We did have our first board meeting on June 17th. We're here again tonight to kind of look at the differences, go over what the surveys were, give you a little bit clearer maps to kind of decipher. In August 19th, what we would like to do is just tweak those maps from what we hear back from your feedback and from what we receive from our community, and bring that back to the board of directors. At that time, if we feel comfortable, then we'll have a community forum with our community and kind of go over the maps, answer any questions, and get additional feedback. Once we have that, we can bring that back to the board. So it kind of really depends on this next month, how well we do, kind of what the feedback, if we feel comfortable moving forward. And if we do, we can adopt as early as September. If not, September or October, but we want deadline no later than November. And so it just really kind of depends on kind of what the feedback is. So I'm just going to go over the maps in a little bit more detail, and then I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Austin that has never seen a back phone, and allow him to continue. This is a little bit closer look at Plan 1, and so there's just a little bit of adjustments in this plan that I kind of want to go through. So the first one is really trying to balance out that Creekview Elementary School that is below 500 students right now. It extends the boundaries across Highway 6 and includes that Midtown Reserve area. That area currently is in Southwood Valley Elementary School. And then if it goes south of Rock Prairie Road and picks up a little area that is, east of Rock Prairie Road, picks up a little area that belongs to Pebble Creek Elementary School. And so those are the adjustments to make Green Prairie grow up. It frees up space at Southwood Valley, as well as Pebble Creek. Both of those are above capacity or at capacity, okay? The next one is Forest Ridge. Forest Ridge is below capacity where it needs to be at this time. Again, Pebble Creek is a little high. So that kind of pulls over, picks up that Southern Point development, which is across Highway 6, and then the area south of that, pulls that into Forest Ridge Elementary School to kind of get those numbers up and relieve some space at Pebble Creek Elementary. And as you can see, when we adjust these, you can only move so much in that area. And I know those are comments that Mr. Dunson's going to talk about, but if you'll just kind of look at the area and see how we can most efficiently move those numbers. The other one is Greens Prairie Elementary. That area currently goes to Spring Creek. Castlegate 2 currently goes to Spring Creek. That would move that neighborhood into Greens Prairie Elementary. And then there's a small little area that kind of flanks the area there of Welborn Road in Georgia. In that area, it's going to go to South Knoll Elementary. I'm sorry, I'm tongue-tied, which is right there in that area. That area currently goes to Forest Ridge Elementary, which is all the way at the bottom of our district. Spring Creek Elementary would pick up a small area that is currently in Forest Ridge Elementary. The neighborhood kind of stays in that area. It looks almost like an eagle right there. If you look at that on a map, that's really trees. So there's really not developments in that area that kind of looks blank. And so it kind of makes a little bit of sense to pick up that if you had to and move that area into Spring Creek Elementary. There's not a lot of students there. It's really just kind of done to clean some lines. And then this would pick up, Forest Ridge Elementary would pick up Greens Prairie Reserve. Okay, so those are some of the major ones on Plan 1. Plan 4, there's some adjustments on Plan 4. And it is, there is a little small neighborhood that is in the College Hills Elementary boundaries in a sense, and it goes currently to Spring Creek. Let me make sure I've got that right. It currently goes to Spring Creek Elementary School. We would pick that up, move that into College Hills Elementaries. The other one, of course, is to go east of Highway 6, but this time just boundary at Rock Prairie. So it would just stop at Rock Prairie, not go further than Rock Prairie like the other map did. The other one is picking up this little property right here. They call that Southern Trace Drive area. That would take that from Spring Creek Elementary and move it into Creek View Elementary to give that space. Spring Creek is another campus that is at or above capacity. Then it would take a smaller area of Forest Ridge and move it in, Pebble Creek, which is the Southern Point edition, and move it into Forest Ridge Elementary. Okay, so when we look at Plan 5, it's a little bit cleaner. And what really kind of Plan 5 does is attempts to take some of our areas that are north of our district that we take kids all the way from the north, all the way to the south, and kind of smooth those areas out, and really kind of makes neighborhood elementary schools. And so that's what we're attempting here. The only difference is if you look at the very top of this map, and we'll go into detail, there is a small green, Kelly Green area in the Hunter Green area up top where that apartment complex sits. That is currently zoned to Forest Ridge Elementary School. The thought there would be Forest Ridge Elementary School would have a lot of neighborhoods that are currently growing. So they're not developed right now. 5 years from now, they might be closer to capacity. What that will allow us to do, if we get 5-6 years down the road, we don't have to do a complete redo. We could take that one piece of property, move it into College Hills, and free up space at Forest Ridge Elementary. If you look at College Hills numbers, and if you look at the school district right beside it, the campus right beside it, both of those are a little bit aging out. So if you look at those numbers, you can see where our older grades are our bigger grades, our newer grades are our smaller grades. So it looks like it's kind of flattening out or declining a little bit. This would give us an opportunity to make that little switch later on down the road and free up space at Forest Ridge and give that space to College Hills or even to South Knoll, just depending on how those two campuses grew 5-6 years from now without having to, like I said, counting can be fun, but boundaries are not. And so that would just be a small adjustment to the map. So same thing. So you can see where we took that small area where you can see the red line shows our current boundaries. The red line on that page that kind of sits like a boot, I guess, is really, it's currently in Pebble Creek. And so what this would do is take half of that development or half of that area, give it to College Hills Elementary, and then the lower half would go to South Knoll Elementary. And then, of course, that green sliver right there is the land I talked to you about. That goes to Forest Ridge. This is the Southern Trace development. It would then go to Riverbend Elementary, again, freeing up space at Spring Creek. Forest Ridge, instead of taking that into Spring Creek, Forest Ridge Elementary, we would take that area, and so that whole little sliver of land, that's like Gringos, the Saltgrass, that whole area and the neighborhood behind it, that would take that to Forest Ridge Elementary School. It takes these two spots, and so when you look at Rock Prairie Elementary's numbers too, those are trending to kind of go flatline, and they're under 500 students as well as what we anticipate to do. So we're trying to give that a little bit more room to future developments and kind of give that campus a little bit more students as well. So we're kind of taking those two areas that were two different campuses and making it all one campus. And so for transportation and for parents and everything, it kind of gives it a little bit of a smoother line. But it's the large area north of Harvey, Mitchell, and Parkway. Currently, that area is at 3 different elementary schools. In addition, there are 2 different spots. So if you look at the area southeast side of Ground Road and between Eagle Avenue and Victoria Avenue, that's your little sliver on the bottom. That would be going into Creekview Elementary. And then up at the top area, which is northeast of Graham and then Arnold Road, we would take that into Creekview Elementary as well. And then Creekview would completely go across Highway 6, pick up all of the Mission Reserve area, past that area, past Rock Prairie, and then take your other area on the east side of Rock Prairie to free up space at Pebble Creek. In addition, it takes a larger portion of Forest Ridge Elementary School. So it extends a pass across Highway 6. It picks up South Peach Creek Cut off road and then the east of Peach Creek Road. This is kind of the numbers that is produced from the free and reduced counts with the adjustments. There's not a lot of movement, but there is a little, but we wanted to have you to have the information in case you had questions about the free and reduced numbers. When you look at the 2 proposed zones for intermediate and middle school, again, we need to move a few students out of Wellborn and get them into College School Middle School, and the same thing for the intermediate schools. When you look at the boundaries for the middle school and intermediate schools, it gets a little bit tricky because we have a dual language campus in the mix. Therefore, when you start trying to flatten your free and reduced numbers for your middle school, it seems to affect the opposite direction on your intermediate school. So it makes it a little bit harder. The first one would just be pulling Castle Gate 2 Edition. Castle Gate 2 Edition has 100 kids in a 5th, 6th part, and it has 100 kids in a 7th, 8th section. So there's a lot of kids there. And so that's why that would pick up and balance that out a little bit. When you're looking at Plan 4, it does the same thing. It pulls the Castle Gate 2, Castle Gate 1, excuse me, and tries to balance that out. But then in addition, it tries to pick up some additional shifts with Mission Ranch and things. And the reason for that is trying to balance out that free and reduced numbers again. So that's the reason why we're shifting some of those kids. Because if you pick up one neighborhood, I mean, it all has to do with free and reduced numbers. Here is some future growth as well. With the Plan 4, it picks up Nantucket. And it picks up the apartments right off the Arrington Road. Plan 4 zone, this is where the adjustments happen at Welborn Road to move those in to your Welborn Middle School. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dunson.
Good deal. So following the last board meeting when these proposed plans were introduced, we went ahead and put these up on the website. We were already starting to get emails following that board meeting, so we wanted a formalized process to collect that data and that feedback. And so put it up on the website, and since then we've garnered a little over 1,000 comments across the board. You can see the breakdown there per plan. These were open-ended questions or open-ended comments. There weren't any specific questions that we were asking. We weren't asking a scaled score. It was just give us your feedback. And so when we're going through this feedback, understand that this is our interpretation of what people are saying based on what they provided. So some folks will get as specific as telling us the street they live on or the neighborhood or the subdivision that they live on. And some people will just say, I don't like this plan, or they'll say this is a good plan. So just keep that in mind. And because we had so many comments and we received several emails and phone calls, we may not hit all of everybody's opinions and feedback at this point. But in general, Elementary Plan 5 was a little bit more favored than Elementary Plans 1 and 2, primarily due to the adjustments made on the north side of town for some of those islands that were kind of picking up kids from the north side of town and they're going to schools on the south side of town. It also makes some adjustments in areas that are not as impactful for some families. For the intermediate and middle school plans, pretty mixed reviews across the board. Intermediate Plan 4 was slightly favored based on that economically disadvantaged percentage, people just observing those percentages and how they were laid out. But in general, not a clear consensus either way on any of the plans. We're really just kind of looking at these and trying to understand kind of where the big themes are, where the trends are, and where some places that we can pay attention to based on the logistics of the feedback. So most common topics that were brought up, the first one was that our maps weren't great. So we understand that. We have posted high resolution maps that are scalable. You can go on our website under each plan. You can look at the original PDF that was posted, and then underneath that is a downloadable PDF. You can download that and look and find where your street is. As well as we added explanatory notes so that those details are provided there. The most common topic that was brought up was related to equity across the schools and balance of the economically disadvantaged percentages, as well as splitting neighborhoods. There are some adjustments that cut through certain streets or separate some of those bigger subdivisions, and so we'll kind of look at some of that. Traffic, transportation, proximity to school, all big topics. Feeder patterns also brought up, and then questions about grandfathering. So what we're going to do is kind of in context of some of the comments that we got, high level view, we're going to look back at some of the maps that Ms. Wilson showed you and kind of compare and contrast those and talk through what kind of feedback was happening from certain areas of the district. So here's a breakdown. We're not going to read over all of this. This is really just kind of taking those big topics and breaking them down by area. And we'll kind of go through and look at this visually. So this is again, kind of the most common topic that was brought up was balancing the school district's demographics. And this is that current boundary of that north side of town where you see some of those islands for Pebble Creek, Spring Creek, Forest Ridge, and Creekview. In Plan 1, as Ms. Wilson kind of showed, that some adjustments are made. So you can kind of see the comparison there of what gets adjusted there. Going to Plan 4, we make some more adjustments to that. Pebble Creek stays where it's at for 1 and 4. And then for 5 gets split between College Hills and South Knoll. That Forest Ridge area, it was previously Spring Creek, and then Rock Prairie takes that northern portion. Okay, so here's this Southern Point area and the Peach Creek cutoff. The majority of the comments from this side of town were related to observations about the enrollment numbers at Forest Ridge. It was also about their community and their neighborhood, but primarily as people were reviewing the plans with the enrollment numbers, they were looking at Forest Ridge potentially being at or over capacity based on these adjustments. Here's the Spring Creek Castlegate 2 area. Majority of the comments in Plan 1 were related to Castlegate 2. And that is that little square down there where Spring Creek, Greens Prairie would take some of that Spring Creek zone. So that's majority of what was talked about in Plan 1 from parents on elementary Plan 1. On 4 and 5, it's that Southern Trace triangle, kind of that Spring Creek triangle there at the top left of that. Was where majority of comments, and primarily parents are talking about proximity to Spring Creek as opposed to Greens Prairie or Riverbend or Creekview. Lots of walkers and bikers in this neighborhood, and parents made that known by saying, we live this close to Spring Creek as opposed to these other schools. So those were the main comments there. On the east side of 6, the fluctuations between Southwood Valley and Creekview and Pebble Creek. Primarily, the majority of those comments came from that top right corner. That's William Creek Lakes Estates. It's a newer development in the Pebble Creek zone, and their main comments related to their commute and their proximity to Creekview. Looking at going across Rock Prairie Road, getting into that area of town, those were the majority of the comments related to that. We had some comments related to Southwood Valley's adjustments and some questions about how that's going to potentially impact folks who live in that Southwood Valley zone and are dual language kids who ride the bus. And so those are some clarifications that we'll make as we move along in this process. For the intermediate middle school plans, lots of feedback about Castlegate, and because this makes some adjustments to their current boundaries. Difference there between 3 and 4 is taking a larger portion of that south side along Highway 6, Nantucket, Southampton. We did have some comments from the Nantucket area, just asking questions, how many kids will be impacted in this area? Nantucket is an older neighborhood, more retirees in that neighborhood, and so just wanting us to look at enrollment numbers there. And then in the Mission Ranch, Willow Run, Southern Trace area over here on the other side of Welborn, really comments relating to splitting this neighborhood or the map not being clear. And so with this new high resolution map, hopefully folks can kind of see what that adjustment looks like. And this is this middle of town kind of area right behind A&M Consolidated High School. Majority comments here based on the adjustment for Plan 4 were related to proximity to the school and the traffic going up Welborn and the logistics of getting their kids to and from school and what that looks like for those families. So next steps, we're going to continue to review feedback. As we shared with you earlier this week in your supporting documents, you do have access to every single comment that's been made up to this point. And so, like we said, we did a high view here, but there's always time to continue to review. The feedback will remain open through the end of the month. So community members who haven't had a chance to do so or are waiting on high resolution maps to be able to kind of parse out where they land in these adjustments, continue to do so. We encourage people to reach out and ask questions or provide feedback online. And then we'll make adjustments here within the next month, just looking at traffic patterns, student enrollment, those kinds of things, working with our transportation department, and then bring updates back in August. Questions, comments?
Okay, let me say a couple of things before you guys just kind of wrap everything up. Just a reminder on board policy. Our board policy when it comes to economically disadvantaged numbers deals with intermediate, middle, and high school. The policy is very clear that we are to bring you and make you aware if the percentages get outside of 10 to 15% from the different campuses. You are not required to take action on that. We are required to bring you the information. What you want to do with that information is totally up to you. You do not have to take action. Based on the intermediate and middle school map, most of that movement was 100% for the eco-disadvantage piece. The two campuses that we're concerned about,
Can you say that again, that last?
Most of the movement for intermediate and middle school was to balance our economically disadvantaged numbers.
That's why you feel like we're, I thought it was primarily a capacity driver, first of all.
It's part of it. I haven't finished yet.
Okay.
Yeah. When we go into, there's two campuses that we're concerned about, intermediate and middle school, Welborn as well as Pecan Trail. We're at a flat growth as a school district. So both campuses right now, I think Pecan Trail maybe has one classroom that's currently available. Welborn has a couple of smaller fishbowl type classrooms that are available. So we're pretty close to capacity. However, it's trickier because we're not expecting any growth. The elementary numbers are pretty more clear cut. We've got about 3 campuses that are at capacity or over right now. And so there has to be movement there. The intermediate middle school, it's a little bit of a different target. You know, what we've got to have after you guys discuss, we've got to have some direction on a couple of things. Does the economically disadvantaged number percentage matter for intermediate and middle school? And it's got to be pretty clear cut. Yes, it does, or no, we're not worried about that. We want to do what's best for traffic flow and for parents, for their kids. So we need some direction on that. These are options. All of these options can be changed. You know, me personally, I don't know how you guys feel. We're not going to split neighborhoods. We're going to have to keep the neighborhood consistent. It's just hard for me to justify sending a bus in, 2 buses into a neighborhood and take some kids this way and some kids that way. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. So those are workarounds. We asked the demographers to give us scenarios. They've given us some scenarios. We're getting feedback from our community. Then we come back and we take that feedback and we try to adjust these numbers. But the eco-dis piece is something that's big because that drives a lot of what we're going to do. And then in the end, the decision, I think the elementary's got to be made depending on what plan, but intermediate and middle school is a discussion point. You know, I talked to Jeff about this. We're going to have a discussion about taking out of district transfers. So it's a little bit of a gamble not to do anything with intermediate and middle school if our numbers hold flat, but then we could push more kids into Cy Grove and College Station Middle School through out of district transfers because we create that feeder pattern if we go that route. And so we can increase enrollment at those campuses without a district transfers without moving our current population of families around. So that's just wanted you to have those things in mind as you're kind of considering and thinking about it. But the biggest thing we've got to know is how serious do we need to be about keeping the economically disadvantaged numbers closer? Does it matter, yes or no? And anything else you guys want us to consider? And then there'll be a more in-depth conversation, probably in the regular meeting. It may be workshop depending on what we have in August, so we can take a really detailed look at it.
So, just so other people know, rezoning is not something we ever want to do. It's not fun for boards. I appreciate the feedback that we have gotten, people coming to speak. We all live in these neighborhoods. I live in Castlegate too. Ms. Iggy lives in Castlegate too. Mr. Ben lives in Nantucket. So, yeah. So if you want to talk Nantucket, and go to Mr. Ben directly. So we appreciate that. The one couple I appreciate that people have been polite in their emails when we redid the high schools, which was when, Ms. Hester, 8, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, before Austin was born. But sorry, but easy target tonight. There were board members that got death threats, and it was just shocking to see how the community reacted. So I appreciate how people are communicating with us, but no, this stuff isn't fun. But the caveat with that I saw quite a few with Castlegate and Ms. Green mentioned today is while we look at traffic patterns, we don't control traffic. If you would like to email City Council, our friends over there, by all means, please do and go talk to them about our roads and traffic patterns. We have nothing to do with that because I run in Castlegate too also. So just a caveat to let people know about traffic. Thank you.
So I think my biggest question, just after what you said, Dr. Harkrider, is that there's one piece to trying to even out our economically disadvantaged numbers, and then there's still a reality, even if we're saying that technically Wellborn and Pecan Trail are not over their capacity number, that they have a lot more students than Cypress Grove and CSMS do. Whether or not, if both schools had the same number of economically disadvantaged students, we would still be in a situation where Wellborn has a lot more kids than, CSMS does. Do we see any problem as a board or as a district with that, considering that in middle school, I feel like it's really important for kids to have opportunities for things. And it's like, we have one pattern that's kind of overflowing with kids and another that maybe like doesn't always have enough kids for some of their teams and stuff. I'm asking that as an honest question because I feel like even if we're not looking at ED numbers, there's still a reality that the school's attendances are really off balance.
There is, because you've got, let's say a larger school, there's only so many girls they're going to keep on a volleyball program, if you keep 3 teams. And so you may be cutting X amount of girls at potentially Welborn and at College Station Middle School, for instance, just throwing. They may have enough girls to try out potentially to have 3 teams and no one gets cut. So yeah, there is a competitive piece of that, especially with UIL activities that, some we take all the kids we can, but certain sports, that's not the case. You're keeping X amount for baseball, X amount for soccer, same thing with basketball, football generally carry larger numbers. But yes, there is a piece where, you're going to have kids that aren't allowed to participate potentially at a certain school, but have that opportunity at another school.
And I would go even one step further beyond that. Say, one of the things that we have heard consistently, and rightfully so over the last several months, couple of years, is the amount of work and stress and so forth that our teachers and other staff have. And so when you have one school with 250 more kids than another, that's additional stress, work, and so forth on the administrators, custodial staff, teachers, everyone else. And so balancing the schools as far as the actual just number of students in them has, hopefully an advantage there too.
I agree, and that's why I apologize for the interruption, but I really wanted to clarify. I thought, because when we started this conversation, my thought was it was primarily on balancing out the capacity, and then obviously the discussion of the socioeconomic balance is, a piece of our policy and also a piece of the discussion. So
I think you look at the rapid growth out south, right? So tremendous growth in those, and then the number of schools we've opened in the number of years. So a little bit is we're spoiled by the neighborhoods basically all have their own elementary school. My kids, I live in Castlegate too. Spring Creek wasn't there. We went to Greensbury, and it was phenomenal. But so there's a tremendous amount of growth that set that off, and now we're working with demographers, and we talk to real estate and see where we're a little bit more boxed in. But what I appreciate is that what I don't think I saw is that anybody has to drive past one school to get to their school, right? So I know we're talking about looking at neighborhoods, but I don't think anyone, you may have to go a little bit further, and I get walkers and bike riders and all that good stuff, but I don't think anyone actually has to drive by one school to get to another one. So I appreciate that, but the rapid growth of how many schools we have opened, and then the budget that comes with all of those, I think has also kind of put us in some of this situation where everyone's a little bit spoiled with how close their school is.
Dr. Payne, when you say that, are you talking about just the middle and intermediate schools?
I think more the elementaries, which I think is probably, you get the emails about friend groups, right? Like you don't want to split up friend groups, and I understand that. So there's probably more wiggle room with elementary schools than there are in intermediate and middle, just because that hasn't been as well established.
Well, I tell you, one thing that has bothered me since before I was on the board is, and I understand, and let me say this, a lot of the things that you all know that we deal with as a school board, there's 2 right answers, or there's multiple factors, so not everything is just black and white. And I understand the benefit of the socioeconomic balancing and so forth, but it has always bothered the heck out of me that we've got kids, and I'm going to stereotype here, but lower socioeconomic kids who probably have less transportation options, maybe have parents that are working multiple jobs, whatever it might be, in the State Street areas, Southgate Apartments, and those kids get bused to Pebble Creek and Forest Ridge and so forth. And again, I see the benefit of that, but that is, as we have spent the last year or two really focusing on making sure that those kids are getting the best education they can get. I would ask, and unless the rest of the board is opposed, that we figure out a way on these, especially on the elementary school maps, to get rid of those little islands where those kids are having to bus and their parents can't necessarily come to activities during the day or whatever it might be. So that's, if there's again, the lines are going to get moved and adjusted as y'all think of additional things and we get additional comments. But if we could get rid of those islands and those kids aren't having to pass 5 or 6 elementary schools to get to their elementary school, I think that would be a good thing.
Plan 5 will eliminate that outside of that one area that we could still potentially move now to.
Yeah, if we could zone them to a school closer, that would be,
Yes, sir.
that'd be even better.
And I talked a little bit about to me, the discussion and the importance really of the considering the socioeconomic levels. I do agree for the elementary is that for a couple of reasons that I am fine with getting rid of those pockets. One reason is they've gotten a lot smaller, right? I mean, y'all can confirm that data, but there are not as many of our students in those pockets anymore. And you can see that in the numbers. That's the other thing. Obviously, I think a lot of people ask for what is the impact of the different plans on the SES numbers, and they don't necessarily make it that much worse. The problem is there already is a significant imbalance in our elementary schools, right? And I think that's maybe another discussion to have of, I mean, do you treat every elementary school the same when one of them has 75% low SES students and one of them has 12 and 13? And I know they're Title I, and I know there's the funding for that, but even the difference between a Title I school that has 75 and a Title I school that has 45% low SES, I mean, is there a difference, and should we be using the same staffing formulas for those? So I guess to me it is, I wouldn't have be as worried about the differences if we were making sure that we were meeting the needs of every campus, right? And just to make sure that we were. But that's really for elementary in my mind. I think it's a little bit different discussion as in the older grades, because I really do think that, like I said last time, what we see between our two high schools and the balance we have between our schools and how that goes into our whole community, it was not by accident, right? It was because of some very hard redistricting, and I think it's very much a positive on our schools and a positive on our community. So for me, I think it's worth considering highly for intermediate and middle school. But I agree with you. It's the question we need to decide as a board what we want. What's important to us is our criteria.
Highly what with intermediate and middle school?
Say again, say it loud.
You said highly with our intermediate and middle school.
Yeah, again, just because I feel
Highly what?
Highly what?
highly important to consider a SES balance.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, make
No,
sure it's
I just-
clear. No, I
I was just
appreciate
making
it.
sure.
That's fine.
Okay. So I've been thinking about this a lot, wrote down some stuff, talked to Dr. Harkrider. I'm a fan of neighborhood schools, always have been. My oldest went to a neighborhood school, and then we uprooted her, moved her to a brand new school, and she had to make all new friends here in CSISD. and she's going to be a Tiger this fall. So I'm pretty pumped. So that's just kind of how she went, and that's just where she's at. My younger two, same kind of thing. Kind of started them, and you can kind of call it a neighborhood school, but we live across the railroad tracks, so we don't really have a neighborhood school. So I like that, and so those maps kind of show me some pluses there. Like Dr. Harkrider said, and him and I talked about this a lot, the out-of-district transfer applications with the voucher systems and things like that, we have to be competitive, and there's no other way to do that now except to consider that maybe for 26, 27, which could help with the maybe kicking the can down the road on the intermediate middle school side, because now we get to say, hey, if you want to come into College Station ISD, and oh, by the way, you're going to be a 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th grader, here's the school you can go to. And so that'll help with the capacity piece of it, maybe not the low SES piece, because we don't know where those kids might be coming from, but it'll help with the capacity piece, because that brings me to the next point with PT and Welber Middle. I can't fathom those campuses having 200 more kids than the same type of school, intermediate and middle school, that they have, like Mr. Ben said. Those, not to say our staffs aren't working equally and all that, but it just puts another level of having 200 more kids on your campus. And if that's the case, and that's what we're gonna do, then we're gonna have to provide some support to those campuses so that they can manage that, whatever that looks like. And that's on management and what y'all gotta do. The low SES, yeah, we've got to figure that out if we're going to focus on that, or if we're going to say our community is what it is. It's developed into what it is in the last 10 years, 15 years, whatever you want to call it. And if certain campuses in years past have had Title I funds because we have focused on that, and if we make changes to make them more neighborhood, and so some of those kids are not going south of town and they live midtown or north town, and they're now going to more of their neighborhood school, the campus might lose their Title I funds. And that's just the nature of how this works. And I hate to say it like that, but if you don't have the kids, you don't get the funding. And so now that funding can go to these campuses where we do have an influx of kids. And now we are taking care of those campuses that have that influx of certain kids and things like that. And then the other schools can take care of themselves accordingly. It's a tough one to figure out, and it's a tough one to figure out which one we want to focus on and how to navigate that. And I get that, and that's why this is the whole discussion. It's going to go on for months. But the capacity piece where we are leveling out, I have a problem with that, because it's not right that we have campuses with that much disparity. With the high schools, yeah, they rezoned and it worked out and all that. But there's a bigger piece of that. That has to do with a whole lot of just making the numbers as far as enrollment. There's some UIL pieces of that. There's extracurricular pieces of that. When we're talking about educating our kids in the younger grades, kinder and all that, it's not about extracurriculars. It's not about UIL. It's not about that. It's about right there sitting in the seat and being comfortable. And what does that look like? What do we have to do to make our kids comfortable and want to come to school? And so we have to take that into consideration, because it's a different ballgame when we have those lower kids.
So,
I guess we could do NIL. Do an NIL deal. Campus wants the students. Let's figure it out. I mean, yeah,
so just
Our
to clarify,
CFO grimaced. Yeah.
Right. So anyway.
so to clarify, I'm hearing you're saying that for like intermediate middle school, you think balancing out capacity probably would make sense from some of the discussions we had.
I think what we have in the next year coming up, where if we do have to consider the out-of-district stuff coming in, that helps with capacity pieces. As far as looking at that piece on a middle school and intermediate, I don't know how important that is right now.
Even capacity.
No, I address the capacity piece with the out-of-district for now. We're not at capacity on them, but when we've got 750, 800 kids, and I probably was off, Welber's got 800, and then we've got
Yeah, there's
500,
like
600
At
at
least a 250
CSMS.
kid difference.
Man, that just,
Yeah.
I get it. I get why it's happened. I don't get why we have to continue down that road.
Okay.
So, because we're staffing them the same as far as I know, roughly.
A little bit different. We've got new staffing models, so depending on the enrollment piece, you may have an extra assistant principal
Okay.
at a campus with less. Middle school has a second counselor per se.
Okay.
Same thing potentially with office staff.
Okay.
I feel like we're in a place where we can take a little bit of a balanced approach. You know, again, we're not in a situation where each middle school has 500 kids and we just want to move them around to fix economic disparity. Like, that's not the situation that we're in. We're in a situation where we have a school that has a lot more kids than another school, and those numbers are off balanced. And so as we look at this, there's a little bit of both in it. I don't think it's like an either or situation. You know, I feel like it's really hard to have the imbalance of numbers, because I think middle school is a really important, and intermediate school too, because we have it happening there as well, just a really important time to be able to try things. And I've seen situations, because my kids have just been through all these years, where there's just not as much opportunity maybe one place at another because our numbers are so off. And so to me, that piece is important to at least consider. But the other thing that I think is important to consider is how people are getting to and from school. I mean, I know we don't get to control the roads and all of the traffic lights and all that kind of stuff, but within the confines of what we have, I think we as a district do need to consider how kids are getting to and from school and what way makes the most geographic sense. So, you know, I'm just saying, I think those are some important questions that have been raised that we should consider as well. And, you know, also just to say to the community, part of this is about being fiscally responsible, because we have these 3 buildings for intermediate and these 3 buildings for middle school. How are we using those spaces the best with the money that we have? And so to me, that plays into this as well, because I feel like although we have some campuses that maybe haven't hit that highest number, if you walk around in those buildings and you talk to some people that go there, you will see that it is much different than if you go to a school that has, you know, 250 less kids. So I just think those are all important things for us to consider as a district and board.
Can I just add one thing in relation to some of the emails that we've gotten? And I agree with Dr. Payne. They have been overly respectful and positive and so forth. But number one, none of our, you know, we have spent the last several years upgrading a lot of our elementary schools, middle schools, intermediate schools. So we don't have the shiny and new and the old and decrepit anymore that, you know, a lot of people base their decisions on. And that being said, I would send my kid to any school in College Station ISD. This is not a situation where we've got this horrible school over here and this great. They're all good. And like I had somebody describe it to me the other day. They said, you know, College Station schools are like cookies. You got your chocolate chip cookie, your sugar cookie, your peanut butter cookie. They're all great. They're just a little bit different. And that is absolutely the case. So, you know, it just, don't be afraid of, hey, my child may end up going to a different school than what we had planned, because all of our schools are great.
That's a great point. And I didn't, just on my opinion, I didn't really say that. I mean, I do think both the comments about the capacity piece of it are important as well. I mean, I think, like, I saw your head shaking over there, that Wellburn, and I mean, they're bigger school. There are there's just a lot of kids in those schools right now, right? You'll feel the difference. Yeah, exactly. I've heard that from people a lot as well. And I think the other side of it is, I know that, like, College Station Middle School struggles to get PTO people, right? I mean, there's just the support in those ways as well. So there's a lot of different ways, besides the ones you've mentioned, that you feel those differences are felt on those campuses. Not to mention, more traffic going to some of those schools. So lots of pieces that are important to consider. I think one question I would have that we haven't talked about yet is that how any of these plans would affect the splits to the high school. Because I know that was kind of a bit, I don't know if y'all have even looked at that at all.
We're not going to split the high school.
No, but like,
High school boundaries.
yeah,
won't
boundaries.
change.
Of the middle
Right, I
schools that
understand.
go to each high school.
But
Like,
the feeders, because it was the feeder patterns. It was kind of when that original plan happened, when there's, 3 middle schools feeding to 2 high schools, there was a lot of discussion, should it be 150% splits? Would that school in the middle get not as much attention from the 2 high schools? So does that
I haven't looked into that.
Yeah,
I didn't
so
know that
that's-
was a thing, so I'm sorry.
Does
No,
that make sense?
Yes, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Most of these
And it-
adjustments are minimal adjustments that would not affect the current high school boundaries. We can take a look and see if that's it. But the high school boundaries right now are 2 circles. And most of these adjustments are subtle adjustments that shouldn't impact that.
Just which percentage, like, say for Wellborn, when it's after the changes with a plan would be made, what percentage of those students would end up going to CSHS, and what percentage of those would go to
We can pull those
Consol,
numbers.
right? Yeah, exactly. And maybe it's not big enough changes to make as much of a difference, but I think it's worth looking
I
at.
think we've got percentages of the kids that at each of those schools that go to the high school, but other than that, that's about it. Yeah, because there's not true feeder pattern. Like if our coaches go to Wellborn, there's going to be kids like the scout football practice. You don't know which one of your kids are coming to you or not because there's a X percent, 40%, whatever that number is going to this high school, and you're only getting the other half.
Yep. Anything else? All right, appreciate y'all doing the research on it. We'll look forward to the next one. The ringside and me adjourn. We'll see y'all at the board meeting.